Stay with us, folks, because we're going to cross to Manchester now and say hello to Colin Harding, Latin America analyst at Latinform. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Sure.
Juan Guaido has made it out of the airport. What does that tell you?
Yes, apparently he set off in a motorcade towards Caracas, which is over the mountains, several miles away, and it remains to be seen if he's having any obstacles are put in his way. Well, it does suggest that the government has made its calculations and have decided it would be worse for it to arrest him than to let him in. They made pretty dire threats at him. The president, Maduro, said that he would have to face the legal consequences of defying an order by the Supreme Court not to leave the country. And the number two in the ruling outfit, Diosdado Cabello, more or less said, well, there's going to be a reception committee for him at the airport, and he's going to end up in jail, which of course hasn't happened. It must have helped that there were about a dozen European ambassadors there to meet him and accompany him now. So he's heading for a rally in the center of Caracas, in the Las Mercedes district of Caracas, which is expected to be very large indeed.
You heard Philip Turl there mention how there's no good options for Nicolas Maduro. Either he arrests him and faces the full force of the international community's pressure, or he appears as weak.
Well, yes, I mean, he's in a bit of a bind, really. Apparently, the authorities, the security authorities at the airport, put out that there'd been no direct order given to them to arrest him. So presumably the government had decided to back off for now. Anyway, once before, just after Guaido took office, the secret police arrested him, but they let him go within a few minutes. And that it's always possible something like that may happen again, but that would show weakness on the part of Maduro. He may now decide to bide his time and see what happens. But the threats of dire consequences from the international community, particularly from the United States, must be weighing on his mind. But I don't think this indicates he's going to step down anytime soon, but he's watching what happens now.
Are you surprised at how much this has become this drawn-out process?
Well, no, I think it's always going to be a drawn-out process. Maduro has shown at every stage that he's got far more staying power than he was credited with, and I think Juan Guaido and his supporters, from the word go, have thought that it's going to be a quick process, that the military were going to go over to him straight away. They didn't. They thought then that Maduro would start to back down when the humanitarian aid was going to come in. The humanitarian aid wasn't allowed to come in, and Maduro didn't step down. So I think now Guaido and an increasing number of his supporters have reconciled themselves to the fact this is going to be a long, slow process, and it'll be political, diplomatic, economic, rather than any kind of dramatic sudden folding by the regime.
Colin, you mentioned the military and the fact that this is not going as quickly as maybe Juan Guaido and his supporters thought originally it might. What do you think it's going to take when there are reports coming through that some of the lower ranks of the military are already joining forces with Juan Guaido and his supporters? What do you think it would take to bring the main military leaders on board or to make them think about changing allegiance?
Yes, there are reports that something like 700, mainly lower ranks, have now gone over the border into Colombia or Brazil. But really, the senior officers have got an awful lot at stake here. They're given tremendously favourable treatment by the Maduro government. The military control food distribution. There's a general in charge of the National Oil Company, which provides most of the country's foreign exchange revenues. They have all kinds of perks and privileges and an awful lot to lose if Maduro falls, because they're then afraid for their futures. So I think there's going to have to be an awful lot more incentive for them to change sides than they have at the moment. They've been assured by Maduro that they'll get an amnesty and fair treatment, but I don't think that necessarily cuts it with them. They'll want detailed negotiations about what happens to them in future, I think.
We're watching live images from Caracas of the motorcade of Juan Guaido, and we're seeing the security detail around his SUV as he makes his way to that rally. In Caracas, we had that one day of where there was a lot of bloodshed at the border, Colin Harding. Otherwise, it's been relatively peaceful in the capital. And here we see Guaido is being taken out is coming out of that vehicle and attending the rally and waving to the crowd. What do you make of Juan Guaido through all of this, Colin Harding?
Well, Guaido is a figure that people feel they can rally around, and of course the demonstrations, the protests that he presided over in Caracas before, the push to bring in humanitarian aid, they were peaceful as well, in the sense that the authorities, the security forces, did not move in with tear gas and rubber bullets and so on, which they had done previously. They had decided to back off. He is a popular figure, and he doesn't present himself as being a providential figure, a messiah who's going to rescue everybody, but he has a clear program of what he wants to do, which is to get rid of the Maduro government, to have set up a transitional government, and then have free elections, which it's been hinted that Maduro supporters, the Chavistas as they're known, can take part. So this rally is the latest in a series of huge rallies that he's presided over and addressed. He's not a tremendous speaker, but he comes across as sincere and articulate, and people can warm to him.
Colin Harding, one final question for you. We have, as we said at the outset, as you mentioned at the outset, those European ambassadors coming to the airport. Clearly Europe on the side of Juan Guaido in all of this. Clearly we have Russia and China and Turkey on the side of President Nicolas Maduro. Where does that leave negotiating, the room for negotiators? Is it all down to, say, the likes of Mexico?
No, not necessarily. There's a thing called the International Contact Group, which consists mainly of European countries, but also several Latin American countries, which is trying to create the conditions for elections to take place. They made it very clear they're not going to mediate, they're not going to preside over negotiations, but they are trying to make sure that the conditions exist. So they'll obviously have to make contact with both sides and try and get some kind of talks between them going together. Clearly, detailed negotiations of some sort, not necessarily in public, are going to have to take place. If there is going to be a transition, it's not going to be, I don't think, a sudden change. But I think the international community certainly has a role to play in this, and it's certainly preferable to any kind of suggestion of military intervention of any sort.
But can the EU be a reliable broker if the EU is already taken aside?
They're not trying to broker. They say that they're trying to preside, to watch over the creation of conditions for elections, which is a bit vague, but it does mean they send people to Caracas, they make contact with both sides, they explore what the options might be, and they try to hope there's going to be the possibility of the two sides at least engaging in some kind of contact. And Guaido has said that he has been in talks with senior military figures, with political figures behind the scenes. We will have to hope these continue.
One final question for you, Colin. What is Nicolas Maduro's next move?
That's a very good question. I think he must be feeling pretty isolated at the moment. He's been very defiant so far, and saying that he's the only legitimate president of the country. He does have some international support, as we've seen. But I think the Russians have actually hinted that they'd be prepared to talk to the Americans sort of over his head about solving the Venezuela situation, which would be interesting to see if that happened. At the moment, Maduro is still dug in. He still at least has the formal support of the military high command of the security forces. He controls all the levers of power, but Guaido doesn't actually really control anything apart from popular support and international backing. So Maduro, until now, has dug in and has remained defiant in the face of all the pressure on him, and we have to see if that continues.
Colin Harding, many thanks for speaking with us from Manchester. Colin Harding, director of Latinform.